All right, day number 18, Progust. Over to you, Geoff.
Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield. It's an album that I guarantee you everybody at least knows about 3 minutes of. The music
Exactly.
famously used in The Exorcist, but there's way more to it than that. It is two 20-ish minute tracks, side one, side two. Pretty much every instrument on the album is played by Mike Oldfield. It was demoed up by him as a teenager, put together, and it became really an iconic 1970s album. It's an incredible composition. Some parts of it perhaps might sound a little bit dated to modern ears, but it's a track that, I mean, I was trying to count the other day how many versions of this album I have, because there's been classical versions. I've got Tubular Bells played on the Moog synthesizer. I've got a version put where all the instruments are played by Irish children. There's all sorts of variations of this, and it kind of has that structure that is a bit like, a piece of classical music, that nobody kind of, people kind of things about, Beethoven's Fifth has been done by lots of people. It's a very interesting musical piece. It's got a lot going on, and I guess the one thing to bear in mind is, when you're listening to it, this is all one guy using, let's face it, fairly, basic, recording technology for the 1970s, and a genius iconic cover, which is an image that is just very, very strong. Again, if you've never heard it, you'll know the start for sure. But there's lots more than the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, and of course, so really, this is the album that made Virgin Records, Richard Branson's record label. I mean, nobody else would sign Mike Oldfield at all. And then Branson came along. He was running a university newspaper, and he thought, okay, I'll start a record label. I'll sign this guy. And he did. And the rest was history. And then he went from there to signing the Sex Pistols and all the biggest bands in the world. So this really started something big.
This album is the perfect album for what Progust was when we first did it, because there's a lot of very famous, well-known classic albums that you just assume you've heard, because they've existed from the day you were born. They've just always been around. But then you realize, I have never actually heard this album. So that was one of the things, like, I know the part you're talking about, but I've actually never sat down and listened to this entire album. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Today is the day.
All right. So if you already know this album, I'm sure a lot of you do, please let us know what you think. If you haven't heard before and you're listening to it for the first time, leave the comments below. Let us know.